We now move to our next speaker, Dr. Susan Moore, fellow West Australian. Associate Professor Susan Moore leads the Nature-Based Tourism Research Group at Murdoch University. Her special expertise is natural area tourism, protected areas of management and biodiversity conservation. She has a significant, impressive list of publications, journals, books, papers, reports, and has successfully led more than 30 research projects delivering outputs to industry, to government and to non-government organisations. And of course, the National Australian Research Council project on national park positioning and visitor loyalty, policy research, etc., which were very relevant to today. I won't outline further her CV, which is available to you in the program, and given that we're a little pressed for time now that we didn't hear the music, we'll go straight to Dr. Susan Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for that warm welcome, and thanks in particular to the Parks Forum and to their sponsors for inviting me to present this keynote paper today. So really, to set the scene, parks are for people, and Rika very clearly made that point earlier. And if we look back in history, we look back towards Banff National Park in Canada. It was set aside as public park and pleasure ground for the benefit, advantage and enjoyment of the people of Canada. Moving across to Australia and to Western Australia, to Yanchep National Park for the protection and preservation of caves and flora and a health and pleasure resort. So we can see right up front that parks are definitely for people. So why research visitors? First of all, it's really important to find out about the quality of people's visit. Did they enjoy their visit? Will they come back? Did they have memorable experiences? Also, all of you in this room, myself included, are obsessed by money. We're all dogged by budget cuts. We need to know, was our money well spent in terms of planning and managing for visitors and for visitors' experiences? And then thirdly, absolutely essential to find out if we're creating loyal visitors, and I've shown that there with the image of people clapping. Loyal visitors will pay to revisit parks, hence the dollar sign, and result in more volunteers, so more people that can contribute to works within parks, and there will be fewer complaints for any of you that have to sit and respond immediately to ministerials. It will result in less ministerials. Current park visitor research, and here I really want to emphasise quickly and briefly that by parks I mean a whole range of parks, from urban parks such as Lake Munga in Perth, Centennial Park in Sydney, through to state national parks like Warren National Park in Western Australia, right through to our iconic national parks such as Uluru National Park in the Northern Territory. And they are the parks, that's the range of parks that I'll be referring to in terms of the range of research that's underway. Three areas that I want to focus on today, and I've selected these because I know that this audience is composed of middle and senior level managers and decision makers. I've focused here on visitor numbers, benchmarking and performance reporting, and visitor loyalty. So firstly, let's look at visitor numbers, and by visitor numbers I mean the aggregate count, the total number of counts of visitors to either an individual national park, to a group of national parks or urban parks within a region, or to a system of national parks within a state. Knowledge of aggregate visitor numbers is absolutely essential to support funding requests. It's a basis for Treasury allocating money to parks and to going to Treasury and to other potential fundors to make a case for additional funding. Research led by Tony Griffin from the University of Technology, Sydney in 2009 and 2010 involved interviewing a number of senior agency staff across Australia, and a number of those staff commented that the estimates that were being currently provided on visitor numbers were embarrassing. So I'm quoting directly from a paper presented by Tony Griffin at the conference in 2008 and to a subsequent report that he presented. The Commonwealth Grants Commission, who allocated funding to the states on the basis of visitor numbers, criticised the inconsistency in visitor numbers coming forward from state agencies, so state park agencies, criticised those figures, saying that they were inconsistent in the methods in which they were used to collect that information, and also there was a high margin of error. One of the main reasons that providing aggregate visitor numbers has been problematic is because of its reliance on counting vehicles and then calibrating those counts. And all of you will be familiar with these traffic counting devices with vehicle classifiers. I've got a couple of images there of those. And many of you will be familiar with this equipment being stolen and with it failing, and with staff not being able to get out and replace or maintain this equipment. So that's been a major problem, and this was highlighted again by Tony Griffin and colleagues when they conducted this research for the Sustainable Tourism CRC. There's also calibration needs and issues. The way that these vehicle counts is calibrated is by regularly counting the number of people per vehicle and then using that as a multiplier with the vehicle counts to give a total visitor number. That requires on-ground staff to be able to count visitors in cars and then apply a factor, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 per vehicle, to get total visitor numbers. And these methods have been critiqued as providing a high margin for error. So what's the solution? In 2008-2009, New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service contracted Roy Morgan to undertake some research to look at another way, another more accurate way of estimating total visitor numbers to their park and reserve system. Roy Morgan used a computer-aided telephone interviewing system. They did 13 waves of interviews, so each wave was conducted over a 4-week period, gave a total of 15,715 interviews. It was a telephone-based system, as I said. They sampled in a number of regions. They sampled in Sydney, regional New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and the Australian Capital Territory. And then they asked people what park or parks had they visited in the last 4 weeks. The biggest issue, as many of you probably guessed, is people had trouble identifying what park they had been to. And so Roy Morgan really focused on getting people to clearly state if they had visited a park that was part of the park group or whether it was another park. And by the end of the period of time, by the end of the 13 waves, they had 86% accuracy in terms of being able to identify the park. These are the results that they got, and this is over the period of time that the survey was undertaken. And so you can see we've got a very clear picture there of the changing use of these parks. And let's see if we... Okay, I'm not going to try and use the pointer. What this shows is the results from the different waves, and on the bottom there is children, and then up at the top is the aggregate count. The Roy Morgan confirmed at the end of the project that the response rate was twice that you get from an omnibus survey, which is where you throw a number of different items into a survey, and the response rate was 17.9%. The margin of error was acceptable, it was 3.7. New South Wales Parks and Wildlife Service had set up to 8% margin of error was reasonable, and it gave a total annual visitation estimate of 38,000 visits. So very powerful figure there that can be used to justify politically funding for a park system. This system is operational in Victoria. Parks Victoria runs a visitor number monitoring program, and this slide here is courtesy of Dino Zanin in Parks Victoria. The way that system works, and those of you from Parks Victoria, you can give me a drink later for promoting your agency, and you can certainly ask Parks Victoria staff for more details on this. It was first implemented in 2001, and it continues to this day. It's based on news poll, telephone and face-to-face interviewing. In 2010-2011, 12,000 interviews were conducted, and these interviews were with Melbourne, with the rest of Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia, and then face-to-face interviews with international visitors departing from the Melbourne International Airport. And the results from that work give 85.95 million visits plus or minus 10% for that period 2010-2011. Now, because Parks Victoria has been collecting this information over a period of time, they can now make comparisons over time about what's happening in terms of their visitor numbers. So if you look at the top line, which is showing aggregate visitor numbers for the period 2001 to 2010-11, you can see the profile, the trend in annual visitation to Parks Victoria lands and waters. Up in the top corner there is the Parks Victoria key performance indicator for annual visitation, and that's set at 88 to 92 million visits per annum, and this very clearly shows that they are tracking towards that KPI at 85.95. The second area of visitor research that I wanted to touch on today is benchmarking, and benchmarking is a system for comparing performance to achieve continuous improvement. So the idea is to continue to improve, and it's part of quality management. Benchmarking can be external, and in that case a particular park would compare its performance with other parks, or it may be a state system of parks that might compare itself with another state system of parks, so it might be external, or it might be internal. So it may be internal to a particular park, or it may be internal to a particular state agency. So, for example, Parks Victoria might compare the performance of its parks within its park system as a state. I've put those images across the bottom because these are the sorts of things that can be benchmarked in terms of the performance of parks. So on the far left, it might be the performance of facilities such as toilets and other amenities. It might be the performance of interpretation and information provision, so that's the image in the centre, or it may be the performance and the responsiveness of staff, and I've included that image there of the rangers. Its great value lies in the ability to allocate resources. So, for example, if a benchmarking exercise is showing that one particular park is performing very well and another is performing badly, it gives managers the information that they can then transfer resources across to that poorly performing park if they want to, or alternatively they can showcase that good performing park, that well-performing park, and take other staff to that park and use it as an example of best practice. So it enables agencies to allocate resources and to set priorities for management. Some examples, one of these comes from New Zealand. I was very aware of our New Zealand visitors today, so welcome. This is an example from your country. Yardstick Park Check runs an operational program to benchmark performance of a number of parks managed by district councils. It's international, it works across Australia and New Zealand, and it covers the facilities that it benchmarks include toilets, signs, paths, playgrounds, the cleanliness of sites. And it uses satisfaction as a benchmark, asking visitors first about overall satisfaction and then asking them about satisfaction with individual facilities and services. The Yardstick Park Check report that I'm referring to here covers 16 district councils in New Zealand. These are some of the results, and I apologise for the size of these. I didn't realise that you would be so far away from them. The diagram in the top left-hand corner is showing overall satisfaction by park type. On the far left-hand column is satisfaction for destinations, so national parks, areas that people have to travel to. The next column over is neighbourhood parks, so that's more urban parks. And then the third column over is sports ground, the fourth column is other. And so that benchmarks very clearly on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most satisfied, the performance of these different park types. The black bar is the average for that period. So it gives you an immediate snapshot of how these particular areas are performing. Can also look at overall satisfaction by authority, so that the district councils are listed across the bottom here, and can evaluate the performance here. This is 4 on this graph, and this is 5. So you can evaluate the performance and compare the performance of these different district councils, and then compare it against the average for all of those councils. So this makes, you could make a very good case as a manager that if you're sitting here, you may need to look for different funding, do some follow-up interviews to find out what's working or not working. And for here, you might offer the opportunity to other district councils to come and look at your parks and see how they're performing particularly well. This benchmarking also enables us to look at the performance of individual facilities. And I've included up here a badly performing facility, or a generally badly performing facility, and a well-performing facility. On the left here, this is the performance of toilets, and the blue is importance. So the blue bars across there are importance, and the red bars are satisfaction. So where satisfaction is higher than importance, people are satisfied. So you've got this little green piece is above that bottom line. With the next one along, with the second one along, you can see that the importance is much higher than the satisfaction, leading to a negative gap, which says that people are not happy with performance. So when you look at this graph overall, it's very clear that for toilets, for most of those district councils, people are dissatisfied and there's a negative gap. So very quickly, this enables senior managers to make judgments about what facilities are performing well and what facilities are performing badly. This chart here is looking at park roads and tracks, and in general, the bar for satisfaction, the red bar, is higher than the bar for importance, which gives a positive gap. And so for a number of these particular district councils, visitors are satisfied with the level of service with respect to paths and tracks. The second example is international. This is another example, sorry, the second example is national. This is taken from the United States, and again it's an operational program. And this is a program run by the US Forest Service, and I've included this this image from the web up here to draw your attention to, firstly, that it's on the web, so you can look at it, and secondly, that they have a button here where you can go in. It says for Forest Service employees or for other. And so all of us can go in there and have a look at it. They do site-based visitor surveys every 5 years. So every national forest is surveyed every 5 years. So it's a rolling plan across the whole of the organisation. And today I'll just talk about overall satisfaction and satisfaction with facilities and services. So first of all, overall satisfaction, and they are able to provide this aggregate data on the level of satisfaction. And 78% of visitors overall are satisfied with the national forests. That's the big blue piece of that pie chart. They also ask about facilities satisfaction, and the way that they do that is to ask people again about how things are performing on a scale of 1 to 5, and then how important things are. And what they're then able to do, and again that's on a scale of 1 to 5, what they're then able to do is to place each of these particular attributes into that matrix and make a judgment about the level of management required. I've got two examples up there. First of all, restrooms. And for restrooms, they are their performance is low. So their performance is low, but their importance is high, which then places them in this category of concentrate here. So this is a very simple tool for managers and for the community to identify which particular attributes of a park or a reserve require management attention. So this is saying we need to concentrate here. The other example I've got there is employee helpfulness, and it's performing well and it's very important, and so that is keep up the good work. So this simple matrix enables rapid benchmarking and comparison across these attributes for all of the national forest in the United States. The third example is from Western Australia. Here I'm talking about StateBased System. This work is under development. It's based on research that's funded by the Australian Research Council and is currently underway, led by Curtin and Murdoch universities. and the information or the data that's being used is site-based visitor surveys. And today I'll show you some recent results on, thanks Carmen, I'll show you some recent results on facilities and services. This is the questionnaire that's used, very similar to surveys used by a number of agencies in Australia and elsewhere, and asking people here, the first example there is pre-visit information on the park was easy to obtain, and people are asked to rank the importance and then rank the satisfaction. From that, this sort of information can be provided on how parks across Western Australia are performing. And the numbers here refer to 13 parks that aggregate data were analysed for. And I'll draw your attention to a couple of features. Parks such as Cape Range in the north, next to Ningaloo, and Monkey Mire are performing very well, and visitors are very satisfied, so keep up the good work. In contrast, these two parks over here, in the concentrate management here, they are very important to people, but the mean performance is lower. This is Karajini, a very challenging remote park in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, and this is Lane Pool Reserve, which is a reserve very close to Perth, which is filled with a large number of socialisers. So a very rapid way of obtaining information on which parks require attention and which parks are performing particularly well. This is an example here looking at the 23 attributes that are covered in the visitor survey, and again I'll draw your attention to a couple of points here. First of all, that Department of Environment and Conservation is performing very well in terms of visitor safety. It's very important to people and people are very satisfied. Over here, management needs to be concentrated in providing better information in terms of guides and maps for visitors. So again, a very rapid means here just in one visual of being able to benchmark across an organisation. Lastly, to visitor loyalty. Loyal visitors return, they pay, they volunteer, they sign and they speak up. And they speak up in this example here in this bottom corner. They protest to support marine parks and other parks and reserves. We have research currently underway looking at visitor loyalty. We're testing the idea that if you improve service quality, that you will have more loyal visitors. And we're intervening to provide better information, to have more friendly staff and have cleaner toilets in Yanchep National Park near Perth and Karajini National Park in the Pilbara, to see if we can enhance loyalty to get all those sorts of benefits I just talked about. The flip side of loyalty is non-users. Why don't people visit? And Deakin University in Melbourne and Parks Victoria have just completed research looking at the constraints. These constraints include a lack of park facilities, a lack of transport, a lack of a partner, and lack of time. They can include cost, and they can include fear. They're most severe for people on a low income, for females, for people with low education levels and being non-white. So there's some very interesting information now coming forward on what constrains people from visiting parks. Lastly, who can do visitor research? And before I say that, visitor research is an opportunity to improve core business. Otherwise, it's a waste of money. The people that can do this sort of research are universities, consultants and agency staff. I'm sure you're wondering why those two cars are up there. I always give this example when I'm talking to people. You pay what you get for. So if you pay for a Suzuki Swift, that's what you'll get. If you pay for a Lamborghini, that's what you'll get. So in terms of paying to get research done, if you have student projects and you pay a small amount of money, you may in fact get a Suzuki Swift. If you pay a larger amount of money and get a consultant, you get experienced university staffs, consulting firms, then you may get a Lamborghini. So don't be tricked, don't be surprised, you pay what you get for. And lastly, to include, I'd really like to emphasise the importance of partnerships. Good research is based on partnerships. And the way that works is researchers and managers need to identify the problem together, don't ever give a researcher money and tell them to go off and do the work. You've got to identify the problem with them. You need to be involved in the design and the analysis and information sharing. The last critical point before I conclude is partnerships are both temporal and spatial. What do I mean by that? Partnerships need to extend over time. They're like a good marriage, they only get better over time. So any relationships between agencies and people doing visitor research need to be built and nurtured over time. And they also benefit from being spatial. When you're doing this sort of work, create partnerships with researchers that have got links across Australia and links internationally, because then you're all getting the benefits of spatial wisdom both across Australia and internationally. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping within the time. We started a little late, so we've crept over the time a little bit, but I think there's time for one question. Otherwise, you can catch up with Susan at lunchtime. I think you're still here. We have a question right at the back there, I think.
I was interested in your talk in that you appeared to be advocating that increased visitation was desirable in parks. Would you care to comment on the trend for visitors to want more experiential visitation? So you may in fact be able to cap your visitation so that everybody gets the right experience rather than just having more visitors, and have visitors involved in more depth in your park rather than just increasing visitors, which will lead to having to have more toilets and better upgrade toilets and more cleaning and so on. That might be quite costly.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the very important pieces of work underway at the moment in Western Australia, and again it's piggybacking on work that's been undertaken by Parks Victoria, is looking at visitor segments and looking at the very different experiences that our very different visitors have in terms of our parks and reserves, and being able to very much tailor the sorts of facilities and services that we provide to the types of visitors that we're getting. So it's not one size fits all, and we're finding that we can very much enhance, manage loyalty and the way that people behave by understanding those visitor segments and then tailoring the sorts of facilities and services and enhanced experiences that people might seek based on understanding those visitor segments a little bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Susan, for that very interesting breakdown of how we can think about the use of our parks.